Good afternoon, everyone. We're just waiting for a few more folks to come in and we'll get started here. All right. Well, good afternoon. My name is Michelle Bailey. I'm the Senior Program Manager and Accessibility Coordinator at the Vermont Arts Council. This event is being live captioned by White Coat Captioning. To view the captions during the event, just click on the closed captions button at the bottom of your Zoom screen. But you can also view a full text page of the captions by clicking on the link that has been posted in the chat below. And this will open the captions in a separate browser for you if you prefer. I'm joined today by my colleague, Beck and Natalie, who will be assisting me with the presentation and keeping watch of questions in the chat and all. And I'm going to start off our session with a land acknowledgement. We wish to acknowledge that in Vermont, we are within the unceded territory of the original inhabitants of Indakina, the Abenaki, and in the southwest portion, the Mohican people. Their traditional and ongoing relationships with the land call us to learn to be better caretakers of the land as well. We offer respect to their ancestors, their elders, and their relations, past, present, and emerging. So this workshop will provide an overview of the grant program, tips on applying, and then a brief introduction to our online grant portal. There will also be time at the end for questions. And as we go throughout the presentation, you can post those questions in the chat and we will address them once we get to the end. Beck will help me if there's a lot of them, and we will try to go through those questions in the chat. But I will also open up the screen and stop sharing, and we can you can ask questions that way as well once we're done. This workshop is being recorded, and we will post it on our Arts Project website on the website for within a few days after this session. And we do ask just that you keep your microphones muted until we get to the Q&A session at the end, just so we don't have any noise interruptions. So let's see. So Arts Project grants support 501c3 nonprofit organizations, municipalities, and schools in their efforts to add vibrancy to Vermont communities by providing equal and abundant access to the arts. Our grant amounts range from $1,000 up to $4,000, and they do not require a one-to-one match at all. 501c3 nonprofit organizations, as I mentioned, municipalities and schools may apply for a project grant, and groups without tax-exempt status may apply if they are using a fiscal agent, and that would also need to be another 501c3 nonprofit organization as a fiscal agent. Important dates coming up. The application deadline is on May 20th. You have until the very end of the day. Our system will not allow any more submissions after 11:59 p.m. So you can get into the system until then. Just note that staff, we stop working around 5, so you may be on your own if you wait till the very, very tail end to get your application in. And we're looking to support projects that occur between September 1st of 2025 and August 31st of 2026. We will notify you of the status of your application by the end of July, and that will come through email. And any grant funds, if you're awarded a grant, will be sent out after the September 1st start date. So again, who may not apply. So if you are an arts organization who has been the recipient of one of our 3-year operating grants that was awarded from FY24 through 26, you would not be eligible to apply in this grant program. We also do offer a 1-year operating grant for smaller organizations that will have a deadline coming up on May 14th. That again is for arts organizations, nonprofits whose mission is for supporting the arts. That deadline is May 14th, and you'll have to decide if you were in that situation, whether you want to apply for an operating grant or an arts project grant. You can't apply for both. So if you're not sure about those arts operating grants, you might want to reach out to Amy Cunningham, who's administering that grant program. There is an arts operating grant program page on our website, and she'll be doing a Grantseeker workshop a little later in March as well. If you are an individual or a for-profit organization, you would also not be eligible in this program. And then if you are an organization who has received a grant from the Vermont Arts Council and you have any outstanding or incomplete reporting documents due, overdue, I should say, or late, you would not be able to apply in this grant. And then schools that are seeking funding for an artist in residence during the school day, or for like an educational institution where projects for which students may be receiving academic credit, those kinds of projects are not eligible to apply. We do have a teaching artist grant program for those school day artist residencies, so I would encourage you to look there for potential funding. What we fund. So we fund many kinds of arts events and activities through this program. It's kind of our catch-all program a bit. We can fund performances, exhibits, screenings, readings, fairs, public art projects, and festivals. And we're looking for those that focus on including new or under-resourced or underrepresented audiences or populations. We fund public art projects where commissioning an artist for the creation of new work, where the community is engaged in the planning, the presentation, and the fabrication. We want to see community engagement in those projects. Creative experiences that are designed to include a specific group or a certain age or income, gender, race, ability, or more to encourage interaction among those groups for arts activities. And then accessibility accommodations that enable people with disabilities to participate in arts programs. We've heard from many folks, sometimes it's hard to find the funding to support those things. So if you're doing arts programming and you want to support those accessibility accommodations, programmatic kinds of accommodations, not capital, like we couldn't be putting in a ramp through this program, but if you need things like sign language interpreters, captioners, those kinds of things, we could help to support through this program for that arts programming that you speak of in your application. So we do accept eligible project proposals from anything that fits within the criteria. However, we do have some areas of priority that we're hoping to address with the grant funding, and that would include projects where they are expanding access to the arts and cultural activities for all Vermonters. We'd like to see projects that reach new or under-resourced populations or groups who might not be able to attend your event or activity, and that you've really thought through and addressed what are those barriers to that participation. Is it a transportation barrier? Is it a language barrier? Is it childcare? As I mentioned, are there accommodations that you might need to welcome people with various disabilities, those programmatic accommodations? And who are those people you'd like to reach who have limited access to the arts due to their age or ability, income, race, geography, or other factors? That it could be a rural community, it could be populations that don't have access to the arts. For example, you might be partnering with a theater company, might be partnering with a senior center, offering transportation to bring seniors to that theater event, and the funding could help support that transportation or other things. So those are just some examples. And then also another area that we're interested in is creative placemaking projects. And these are projects where they are really place-based projects that address broader community goals. Maybe the goal is around safety or community vibrancy or the vitality of your community, walkability, creating social connections and interactions between and among people. That would be, as long as it's place-based. And also where cross-sector partners come together to achieve something collectively that they couldn't do alone. And we welcome projects with cross-sector partners that kind of re-envision these place-based or public spaces and strengthen community identity and social connection through the arts. And then finally, projects that address issues related to the impact from a recent disaster. And that could be any kind of disaster, really. But as long as people are needing, if you need to use the arts to help people reflect or communities to heal or recover from one of those disasters, of course, the most recent one of more of the floods from the last couple of summers. And then also projects that are maybe helping those communities to revitalize the downtown villages and neighborhoods because of a disaster or some other. And a disaster might be that, the businesses are all moving out of town or something. So, you can define that broadly. All right, so accessibility. All applicants funded by the Vermont Arts Council must comply with access and non-discrimination policies and law. And programs and activities are more welcoming and inclusive when they engage a broad spectrum of people in integrated settings that provide equal, effective, and enjoyable arts experiences for all. And there's a link to more accessibility resources in the guidelines and in the application preview as well. So when the projects are being evaluated, we are looking at two kind of broad areas of review that will be evaluated by our review panel. That's the quality and impact of the project, and then also the project management. Successful applicants will address all of the criteria to the best of their ability and to be evaluated, and the quality of the project, the quality and the impact of the project is weighted at 70% of the review. And the review panel is looking to see that the proposal or project or creative experience has high artistic merit, offers rewarding and or positive arts experiences for those participants and or the community, that it demonstrates meaningful community partnerships between arts and non-arts groups that enhance the quality of the project, and strives to remove or reduce barriers to participation for under-resourced groups. And these groups might include, but are not limited to, people of color, Indigenous people, people who identify as LGBTQ+, people with disabilities, people who identify as immigrants or refugees, people whose first language or only language is not English, at-risk youth or rural communities, and more. So you can make the case for that in your application if you something that doesn't fit in one of those. And then the project, the remaining 30% of the review is project management, meaning that the proposed project or creative experience is clearly defined and planned with a realistic timeline, that there's strong leadership in place to manage the project, demonstrates effective outreach and promotional plans, is compliant with those access and non-discrimination policies and laws, and has a clear and reasonable budget where artists and creatives are appropriately compensated. We really do want artists to be compensated in these projects, so making sure you're paying your artists. So when you log into the application, you're going to see that there are tabs across the top of the page with different sections. You can access them by clicking on to the specific section, but in this one section where there's narrative questions, I'm drawing your attention to this because those questions that have been developed all relate back to that criteria that we just listed as the way that our panel is going to be evaluating your proposals. So we also understand that due to the timing of these grants, sometimes a lot of the details may still be in the works. This grant period goes from September 1st of this fall through August 31st of next summer. And we may be asking you to plan a summer event for 2026 when you haven't even done your summer event of 2025 yet. So I'll get into how to address that in a moment, but we understand that the timing is a little bit funny with that, and that it's okay. We want you to demonstrate that high potential for meeting that criteria, and you can do that through various ways. So I'll get into that in a minute, as I mentioned. We do ask for artistic support material as well. And so if you are proposing to work with artists in your proposal, and it would be really important to have additional materials so we can understand the artists and the art form. And that could include up to 5 images or PDFs, or audio video links that there's some fields in the application where you can upload a link to those. So maybe an artist has a link on their website, or there's links to short videos in Vimeo or YouTube or any of those platforms. You could just include a link to those in the application there. These support materials really help our review panels to understand that artistic quality and merit piece of the application. And if there are artists that you're hiring for these activities, share their work samples, or maybe it's a workshop. So can you show some evidence of their teaching abilities, etc. And if you don't know who the exact artists are yet, for next year, if you run a similar event, who are the artists that you've got lined up for this year's event? Is it something that you can share that list just to give the panel a sense of the quality and the kinds of artists that you would be seeking for next year, even if you don't have the exact list yet? Or if it's something you're doing for the first time, give us a sense of some potential artists, or the kinds of artists that you're considering, just so that our panel can get a sense of your vision and the quality of art that you're looking to support. And all of these materials are, again, used to highlight your project and your organization and its work. You can also include brochures or posters or information from past projects or upcoming events to demonstrate that quality. So highlight your organization and the work that you do with these additional support materials. In the application, there is a form for your project budget. Applicants should provide a clear budget that demonstrates the feasibility of the project to the panel. They will want to know how much is it going to cost, meaning your expenses, and then how much and how will you pay for it? What are the income sources? So since there isn't a match required, the budget can be an outline of how the grant will be spent. But if the project is estimated to cost more than the grant amount, you should indicate who those sources of other income might be, how you anticipate to pay for the amount over the grant award. And it could be admissions or private contributions or corporate contributions, sponsorships, other grants, those kinds of things. And then there are lines that include personnel expense and non-personnel expense. And if you have some other expenses that aren't kind of included in that, you can use that other expenses field and then just make sure you highlight what those other expenses are. Your budget should be balanced, meaning that the expenses and the income are the same number. It should be clear and understandable. Don't make it too confusing. And then reasonable, meaning that the expenses and income make sense, that they're realistic and doable within the time frame, and that you are compensating your artists. And then immediately following that is a budget narrative. And in this field is where we want you to explain how you may have arrived at the numbers in that project budget. Be sure to explain any amount categorized as other, or if you have any in-kind contributions, you can use this space to describe them. If numbers in a particular line item represent multiple sources, so you might have personnel artists, maybe you're hiring 3 artists. In this narrative, budget narrative place, this is where we would want you to kind of break down those numbers. Maybe you're paying 3 artists $1,000 each for your event. You could list their names or just say 3 artists at $1,000 each. Or maybe there are different amounts. You could say artist number 1 at 500, artist number 2 at 1,500, artist number 3, 1,000, just so the panel understands how much you're paying your artists and the amounts, and all, so that we get a little more detail. This narrative, when we say narrative, it doesn't mean it has to be lengthy text-based long paragraphs of descriptions. It can be bullet points. In fact, it's great if you can keep it brief and just explain numbers in a very concise way so that the panel has an understanding of how you came up with those numbers and that you're understanding how you're going to pay for it and what the expenses are. And then, if there's ways that you plan to raise those funds, indicating that in a little more detail here, if it's something that's above and beyond the grant amount that you need to raise additional funds for. So we do have a line item in that budget around accessibility costs. We are wanting to remind you to include those costs in the budget when you're putting together your project budget for your programming and the events. There are a few examples here on this page of some costs that are really just ballpark to give you an idea. It really is going to vary greatly depending on the source, the kind of project you're doing, the length of time, the complexity of it, the service providers. This is not an exact be all end all amount, but just to give you a really brief idea of different types of things to consider. And we do want to see that people are budgeting for these kinds of things, so our panel looks for that. So just keep that in mind as you're putting together your budget. And then, yes, so I think that's all. Make sure that they're visible in your budget narrative too, if you want to describe anything in more detail there. So a few other tips when you're preparing a strong application. I encourage you all to read through the guidelines, do a little bit of research, do some planning, and draft your responses to the narrative questions ahead of time. There is an application preview and a link to that on our website, and there's a lot of help text in that, which I'm not going through in great detail here, but it gives you a little idea of how what kinds of responses we're looking for those questions and some tips on the things you should be thinking about to answer those questions. And those, again, relate back to that criteria. So keeping that in mind. And then start the application well before the deadline. Give yourself plenty of time before that deadline. Type up a draft. You can type it ahead on a separate application, and then sometimes people will get it already. There are character limits and things like that in the system, so you want to be aware of that. That's listed in the application preview, but just get your text prepped ahead of time, and then you can cut and paste it into the online form when you're ready to do that. And then also leave yourself plenty of time to deal with technical issues. If you start well ahead of time, if you have trouble uploading an image or something, Meredith Bell on our staff is very helpful with people about getting those technical issues resolved. So she can help you. But again, if you're waiting till the last day, we can sometimes get inundated with calls. And so we don't want you to be stuck because you couldn't get through to us. So the earlier, the better. Also, don't assume anything. When you write your application, write it for the person who doesn't know you, they don't know your project or your organization or your community. So describe that in your application in enough detail so that the panelists have a good sense of who you are and what you're trying to do. And then be clear and direct. I always recommend having someone else read through your proposal to see if it communicates what you intend. Watch out for unnecessary information or using wordy or jargon-filled language that maybe the committee or panel might not be aware of. Are there any areas that seem confusing, vague, or overly detailed? You could find someone who can read through this and provide you with some constructive feedback and give you that, not just someone who's going to say, oh yeah, it sounds great, but just asking them, do you understand my proposal? Do you have a clear picture of what we're trying to do and our organization? And as I mentioned, there are character limits, so watch this carefully. We don't want you to cut off have your answers cut off from our panel if they're not visible because you went over the character limits. And this, again, those support materials really reinforce what you've written in your proposal. And then provide a concise, reasonable, and balanced budget. I've gone through that already, primarily in the slides before, but just making sure that it's clear and understandable. And there are some more tips about artistic quality and merit on our website. And again, in that application preview, more guidance on how to answer some of those questions and what we're looking for. So what is our panel review process? Well, our peer panels are outside peer reviewers, and they serve as an advisory role to our Board of Trustees. The panelists are comprised of external reviewers from different organizations, disciplines, peers from a variety of areas of the arts and non-arts and creative sectors. And as I mentioned, remember, they may not be familiar with your project or your organization. And the Vermont Arts Council staff only facilitate the panel discussion. Our role is to help you put together the strongest proposal that you can to answer your questions, and then we help guide and facilitate our review panelists through the funding panel process. And then we will also, if you don't get funded, or even if you do get funded, we can help provide feedback on your application. So we take notes from our panelists when they review the applications and summarize them, and we're happy to provide you with that feedback. So I encourage you to do that if you would like. And then after the deadline, when our panelists are reviewing the grants, again, they're using that criteria to guide them on evaluating the proposal and scoring those proposals. And then they will meet this summer to discuss them and then make those funding recommendations so that we can then send them off to our board for their final approval and then notify you by the end of July as to whether or not you've been recommended for a grant. So remember to keep in mind some important things that we're looking for in these grant applications. These all kind of relate to the criteria, but I just want to highlight them again. We want to be supporting within the context of your project and or the community, that these are quality arts experiences offered to audiences and participants, that there is really meaningful outreach to new or underrepresented populations. If you're trying to reach out to some folks, but you don't outline in your application how you're going to reach out to them, or who your connections are and how you're going to communicate to them about this opportunity and invite them to participate, that can be difficult for our panelists to understand. Thinking about the who and the how and the what you want to do. Community partnerships are between arts and non-arts organizations for those things that, what are these things that you can not achieve alone, but that you can better do together? And then barriers to participation, have those been addressed? As I mentioned, those can be funded with the grant application. Making sure that the event, activity, or the experience is accessible to people with various disabilities. And again, the artists are being compensated for their work. We don't want to, as the Arts Council, encourage you to be asking your artists to do things for free. So that's a really important piece here as well. So let's see, next up is a little bit more, another requirement is what we call for each applicant organization. And many of you probably have these already because this has been around since 2022, but the federal government is using, asking people to have a unique entity ID. It used to be the DUNS number we had to submit with our applications, but now it's a unique entity ID number. And there is actually guidance on how to get one of those on our Arts Project grant page if you don't have one already. Usually for most organizations, it doesn't take long, but I'm not sure of the timing these days. And, things are a little bit questionable in terms of the federal agencies and things these days. So I would suggest that you start early. If you have any troubles or delays getting this before the deadline, please let us know ASAP, as soon as possible. as we can help you work through it. We don't want that to be the reason you don't apply. We really need it if you get a grant. We can't release the funding without the UEI number, but if you have trouble getting it, things are delayed, reach out to us. We can help figure that out for you. We don't want that to be the reason you can't apply even. So that's what I suggest. But really, you should start now and get your UEI number now. So I'm going to shift gears now to a little bit about our online grant application portal. If you've never applied to us for a grant before, you will need to have in the online application a username and password. In order to get this set up, you will need to register in the grant portal before you can access the online application. This takes a couple of days for our staff to review if you're not in the system already. So I suggest this is another thing that you can do right now before you even start your application, is get your organization set up in there. And how you do that is when you click on this guidelines and application section on the Arts Project Grant page, you'll see an orange Apply Online button. When you click on that, it's going to bring you to this welcome page. And if you don't have an existing username and password, click on the register tab there. That's a hyperlink to some questions about your organization and information there to help you get registered. And again, if you have any problems, Meredith Bell is our system expert and will help you with any of that if you run into any technical issues there. So once you have registered and then you do log in, you should see your name and your organization listed right there up under that banner and under the photo banner. So that's where you'll know that you have, we've welcomed you to the site and that things are you are in the system. And when you get in there, you're going to want to click on that tab at the very top called Organization Applicant. And so when you click on that, you should see a drop-down menu there that gives you the available grants. And then when you see that, it will bring up, and you're going to want to go down and click on the link to the Arts Project's FY26 grant application. And then within that grant application, you're going to see there are tabs across the top of the different sections of the application that I mentioned. There are guidelines, there's organization information, and then those narrative questions, your budget, all those things. You can actually navigate through this if you prefer, and just to get a sense of the different sections and what's there, and work on them out of order. That's fine. You're not required. Just make sure that you save often. At the bottom of this page, like I said, you can navigate by tabbing through those tabs at the top, or you can just hit next as you come to the bottom of each section and go on to the next one. But please do save. It does save automatically, but just in case, we always encourage people to save regularly. Then you can always log out and exit up here, and then come back and log back in. And I'm jumping ahead a little bit. I wanted to point out these narrative questions on this section. As I mentioned, you can tab through and work on them. All of the required fields are highlighted in red, and they have a little asterisk next to them on the screen, so you'll know whether it's a required field or not. And then if you do log out and then want to come back in when you do, this time when you go and click on the organization applicant, instead of going to available grants, just go to my saved applications. That's where you're going to find your work that you have been working on with this application. So if you need, that's a very quick overview. If you need any help in registering, signing in, or navigating in that online system, any technical issues, uploading files, those kinds of things, I would suggest you reach out to Meredith Bell. She's can be reached at this email at mbell@vermontartscouncil.org, or you can call her at 802-402-4478. Her contact information is also in the guidelines and on the application page. And in the system, I think, but she's on our website and can help out as well. But if you have any questions about the program, the project, or you just aren't sure about questions about how to answer questions and those kinds of things, that is where you want to talk to me. So you can reach me at mbailey@vermontartscouncil.org, and my phone number is 802-402-4614. But again, I'm on the grant website as well and in the guidelines and everything. So that is how you can reach me. So I am going to stop my sharing for the moment and open it up to questions as we've been going on here. I will look and see here. Oh, okay. I'm just going through my chat screen here. Marie Pierre Pi asks, what do you mean by personnel artist? Is that an artist that is already on staff at the organization? No, not necessarily. It doesn't mean that they are on your staff. It just means these are people you're hiring. By personnel, we just mean the people you're paying. So if you might be, have a contract with an artist to do one event, and that's it. That's pretty common. That's okay. So either way, and if you do have staff that you do have that are personnel staff that are on your payroll and they're helping to put together this project, then you would include that under personnel, probably administrative. I don't have the budget form open up, but there should be different lines there for that. Oh yes, and Beck, thank you, putting the unique entity ID link in there if you need any help getting that. It's also on our website. And then we have, if the organization has applied in the past, but I'm a new grant preparer, should I get my own username ID, user ID and password, or find the ones previously used by the org? We really prefer if you can use the ones that are already in existence for that organization, because you're going to be, even though you might be the grant contact within that organization this time, it might be a different person since you're new as the preparer for the grant. But we want you to use that same grant ID for the organization, and we can help. Meredith can help with that if you have any problems figuring that out or needing to know how to do that. I would start with folks, if you have access to people who may be still around at your organization, but if not, definitely reach out to Meredith. She can help you to get a new person set up as a grant contact in that application. Let's see. I'm curious to know if you support Vermont-based organizations bringing in artists from out of state. Oh, and will this recording be available after a presentation? So we don't require that you hire Vermont artists. It's fine if you're hiring out-of-state artists. We like to encourage you to hire Vermont artists because we are the Vermont Arts Council, but it's not a requirement. So yes, it's fine if you're bringing in artists from wherever you might be bringing them in. And we are recording this and we're going to be posting it on the Arts Project grant page, right where you found the link to register for this workshop. We will be posting it probably within a few days here, so it will be back online there. So that seems to be it for the questions in the chat, but I'm happy to open it up. If anyone wants to raise your hand and ask a question through the magic of Zoom. Are there any questions out there? Moment here. I'm not seeing any yet. I am happy to. Oh, did I hear somebody?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm curious, do the artists who were applying to a hire have to be like very well known? Like if what are the requirements in that sense?
It really varies depending on the context of your project and what you're trying to do, where you are. If it's a really a rural community who wants to bring in some local artists to do a workshop with some seniors in the senior center. I'm just making up a project idea here, but there's very good reasons why it doesn't have to be like a nationally known, super expensive artist. It's within the context of your organization, your community, the resources you have available. So, we just want to know a little bit about that artist so that the panelists can understand the artistic merit of that proposal or that artists or artists within that context. And so that's why it's helpful to have images, websites. If your artist has a website, please share that. Those kinds of things help them to understand what the experience will be and a little bit more. So does that
Thank
help?
you.
Okay. Yeah. Other folks. Yeah, Sudi.
I just wonder whether you have any specific requirements or guidelines as to what percentage of the total project cost your grant will cover. In other words, will you cover 100%? Will you cover no more than some other percentage?
Yeah. No, you can apply for a grant for $4,000 and have the budget be exactly $4,000. Or I got a question the other day from someone who thought they might have a budget of only that minimum $1,000. It's a much smaller project, and that's fine. We don't require that you that grant be a certain percentage. You can just apply for the funds you need to do the work. But we do ask that we have a minimum grant of $1,000 just because it's, to put together for you to put together an application for people to review it. It's just kind of the minimum that we find is just makes most sense to go through the process with. But if you have artist fees, if you have administrative costs, travel costs, if you have to rent equipment or rent space, or all those things can be a part of your budget, and the grant could cover 100% of that if need be. But if it does, like I said, go over your maximum of $4,000, or it's going to cost more than what you're requesting, we'd want to know, if it's a $6,000 project or a $10,000 project, where are those other funds going to come from? But we don't require a match.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Others? Let's see. Oh, good question, Susan. Susan, yes, our budget is about 40% federal, and we have not had any guidance yet from the National Endowment for the Arts. That's the source that we get. So we are moving forward as planned until we hear otherwise. So that's what we're doing. And it's hard to know exactly what our future will hold, but we intend to continue to move forward with our programs. So anyone else? Well, I am happy if anyone has kind of specific questions about your projects specifically, and you want to have a phone call with me or do send me an email, I'm happy to respond. Sometimes it might be easier to just shoot me an email, say, hey, I want to have a phone conversation. Can we schedule a time? Just because I am out and about and doing different meetings at times. So I sometimes find that's the easiest way to connect, but I do welcome phone conversations because sometimes it's easier to just have a talk about what you're thinking or what your questions are. So I do invite those. All right. Any other questions from anyone? All right. Well,
Thank you, Michelle.
yes. Thank you. Hi, Morgan. Nice to
Thank
see you.
you.
Yes, you're very welcome. And we will end our workshop now, but again, feel free to reach out. Have a great day, everyone.